Imagine marching 60 pounds of iron and wood through knee-deep mud while freezing mountain air burns in your lungs. Rain soaks your clothes. Your boots sink deeper with every step. And the man next to you has already collapsed. No enemy, no battle. Just the landscape trying to kill 30,000 men before they even reach the battlefield. When we imagine Roman power, we picture shining armor and unstoppable legions marching to victory. But Rome's greatest enemy was not always another army. Sometimes it was the march itself. Because conquering the ancient world required solving a brutal question. How do you move an army through places that barely support human life? Every Roman soldier carried something called the sarcina. It was a heavy wooden pole balanced across the shoulder, carrying nearly everything he needed to survive. Armor and weapons hung beside cooking pots, entrenching tools, spare clothing, and rations packed tightly together. Altogether, the load weighed close to 60 pounds. The soldiers even had a nickname for themselves: Marius Mules. They weren't just warriors. They were pack animals responsible for hauling their own survival across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. A Roman legionary might march 20 miles in a single day, carrying that burden through forests that blocked out the sun, across mountains where the air grew thin and cold, and through swamps where every step dragged boots deeper into sucking mud. The northern provinces were nothing like Italy. Germania, Britannia, and Dacia were lands of endless rain, freezing winters, and thick wilderness where Roman roads had not yet been carved into the earth. Only narrow animal trails cut through the terrain. If a soldier fell behind the marching column, he rarely caught up. The forest swallowed stragglers quickly, and somewhere beyond the trees, hostile eyes were always watching. Yet the weight on a soldier's back served a purpose beyond survival. Those tools were the foundation of Roman power, because every soldier was expected to be a laborer long before he was ever called to be a warrior. Now imagine feeding 30,000 soldiers who march 20 miles a day while carrying 60 pounds of equipment. A Roman soldier required roughly 2 to 3 pounds of grain each day just to maintain his strength. Multiply that by the size of the army, and the numbers become staggering. More than 60,000 pounds of food were needed every single day. That's roughly the weight of 6 adult elephants. And the soldiers were only part of the equation. Thousands of mules and horses pulled wagons filled with tents, engineering tools, spare weapons, and supplies. Those animals needed food as well, which meant the Roman army moved with something enormous behind it. A baggage train stretching for miles. Wagons creaked through mud, while pack animals stumbled beneath heavy loads, and engineers marched alongside them, hauling timber and tools for whatever obstacle lay ahead. From a distance, the column resembled less of an army and more like an entire city on the move. But that city had a fatal weakness: its supply line. If an enemy force managed to strike the baggage train, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Lose the wagons, and suddenly 30,000 men have no food. In those moments, Roman armies were forced to rely on the most dangerous strategy of all: foraging. Soldiers scattered through hostile countryside, searching desperately for grain, livestock, or anything remotely edible. Many frontier tribes understood this vulnerability perfectly. Rather than confront the Romans directly, they burned their crops, abandoned their villages, and disappeared into the forests. The Roman army would arrive to find nothing but ashes. Hunger quickly became a more dangerous enemy than any blade. Yet the Romans kept marching through the blackened fields, because to stop meant letting the wilderness finish what the enemy had started. The Roman army possessed a weapon more powerful than swords: engineers. When a legion encountered a raging river, it rarely turned back. Instead, Roman engineers assembled pontoon bridges using boats, timber, and rope, often allowing thousands of soldiers to cross within hours. Entire armies passed over rivers local tribes believed were impossible barriers. But rivers were only one obstacle. Northern mud could swallow wagons whole, trapping entire supply columns in place. To overcome this problem, the Romans built what historians now call corduroy roads. Thousands of logs laid side by side across marshland to create a stable surface. The work was brutal. Soldiers chopped trees, dragged heavy trunks through mud, and hammered them into position while rain poured down and insects swarmed their faces. Slowly, the swamp transformed beneath their hands until an impossible landscape became a functioning road. Then the army marched forward again. To the tribes watching from the forest, the transformation must have felt surreal. One day, the wilderness stood untouched. The next day, a Roman road cut through the trees, a Roman bridge spanned the river, and a Roman army moved steadily across the land. The empire did not simply arrive with soldiers, it arrived with infrastructure. When the marching finally stopped, the soldiers did not collapse into sleep. They built a fortress. Every night, Roman armies constructed fortified camps with trenches, ramparts, and wooden palisade walls, even if they intended to abandon the site at sunrise. After marching 20 miles and hauling 60 pounds of equipment, the legionaries still had to dig earth, cut timber, and raise defensive walls before they could rest. This routine was exhausting, but it served a critical purpose. Roman commanders understood that frontier warfare offered no comfort and no mercy. Storms could wash away roads overnight, supply lines could collapse without warning, and ambushes could erupt from the forests at any moment. Without strict discipline, an army of 30,000 exhausted men could descend into chaos in days. Roman discipline prevented that collapse. It forced order onto landscapes that seemed determined to destroy the army moving through them. When we picture the Roman Empire, we usually imagine epic battles, shield walls colliding, legions advancing, and victories recorded in history. But the real secret of Roman power was far less glamorous. Rome did not conquer the ancient world through battlefield brilliance alone. It conquered through relentless endurance. Soldiers who marched farther, carried heavier burdens, built roads through wilderness, and maintained discipline in conditions that would have broken most armies. Before Rome defeated its enemies, it first had to defeat something even more brutal: the land itself.